Hello and welcome back to What Do You Believe? I am absolutely nobody special from the heart of working class USA, and we're just getting started. So I've thought a lot about in getting started. What's the first thing that we should address? What should this first video? There are so many things going on in this country. There's a ton of places we could start. Well, because of the fact that we have an absolute horrible corporate media, incapable of telling the truth, unwilling to tell people any part of the whole story about anything, and only reporting on the part that fits their social and political agendas. It leaves just a huge array of topics that we could get into. But because, we also suffer probably from a little bit of media overload. Internet, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. All that stuff. Sometimes we get a little bit of short-term memory loss. In other words, we don't always remember the details that led us to where we are now. So it's 2020, and there's a presidential election coming up. So I thought a good place to start would be, how did we get Trump? How did we get where we're at right now? We're going to do a little hit and run, kind of a drive-by through recent political American history. So let's get started. In 1980, Ronald Reagan gets elected, takes office in 1981. At that time, we were in a depression. Double-digit unemployment, double-digit inflation. Now, we're not talking about all the politics of an administration. We're talking about, this is going to be focused on the working class, so I need to get that out of the way up front. So, double-digit unemployment, double-digit inflation. Ronald Reagan institutes something called supply-side economics, which then gets nicknamed into Reaganomics, which then gets nicknamed into trickle-down economics, and why we got to nickname something like 3 times, who knows. But it's what we did. Now, trickle-down economics is the term that usually gets bantied about in the press nowadays and politicians. And the left typically tells you it doesn't work. Well, typical of the left, they lie. Typical of the media, they lie. All the time. About almost everything nowadays. But, see, the whole truth is it did work. But it came at a cost. You see, Ronald Reagan left office after 2 terms in 1988. George Bush gets elected, takes office in 89. But when Reagan left office, starting off in a depression, unemployment was back down to just over 5%, and inflation was back down to just over 5%. If you lived through the 80s, there's no doubt that it worked, but it did come at a cost. That cost would be deficit spending. That cost would be how much our national debt grew. Everybody griped about it then, and I think, if you are any at all familiar with recent American history, you'll know that the rising debt of the 80s is nothing compared to what was coming next. But anyway, so trickle-down economics absolutely works, but it does come at a cost. National debt, deficit spending. But 88, Reagan leaves office. George Bush gets elected. The economy's growing quite well, actually. PC computers are just really kind of coming into their own. The internet is starting to get traction. Right around the corner, you've got the cell phone boom and the dot-com explosion. The American people are doing amazing things at this point in time. George Bush The American working class had just been put through the ringer in the 80s. I mean, double-digit unemployment and double-digit inflation. So not only are a lot of people out of work, but everything cost a whole lot more than it should have, which is kind of a double whammy on the American people. George Bush campaigns on a line of "read my lips, no new taxes." Now, in 1990, George Bush and his administration did put forth a new budget plan that was 100% based on spending cuts and everything to keep his promise of "read my lips, no new taxes." That plan was voted down along purely partisan lines. In other words, wasn't supported by a single Democrat. Now, here's the part when I tell you that if you're in the working class, your enemy isn't just the Democrats or isn't just the Republicans, it's both. Because this is kind of the first real beginning of the assault on the working class. Just outright assault. I mean, we've just been through the ringer in the 80s, right? And the compromise between Republicans and Democrats, you can look it up, they passed an omnibus tax bill in 1990 that was the largest tax increase in American history. $500 billion of new taxes on the American people. It's a bunch. Well, did the corporate media tell the American people that Bush did try to keep his promise and that it was voted down along purely partisan lines? No, they did not. What they did do, however, was play little snippets of his campaign, "read my lips, no new taxes," and then play a little snippet of him signing into law the largest tax increase in U.S. history, which would explain why in 1992 he lost to Bill Clinton. Right? Because, well, he's a liar. He said he wouldn't raise taxes, and he put the largest tax increase in U.S. history into effect in the middle of his presidency. Then we got Bill Clinton. But now, here's the thing that a lot of Americans probably either don't know or don't remember. And the media's not going to tell you because they have no interest in you knowing things like this. Matter of fact, they don't want you to know things like this. Neither do the politicians. In 1993, now keep in mind, 1990, omnibus tax bill, $500 billion. That's with a T. Well, in 1993, the Clinton administration passes another omnibus tax bill, tied for the largest in history. Matter of fact, it was almost identical to the one George Bush passed. Another $500 billion. So in 3 years, our politicians saddled the American people with $1 trillion in new taxes. Now, the left always loves to talk about Bill Clinton, that he had a budget surplus. Well, you've got the internet picking up, the dot-com explosion, and you've put a $1 trillion in new taxes on the public in 3 years. If you don't have a budget surplus, you're an idiot. However, the American economy is not like a sports car, it's more like a freight train. It doesn't exactly take off real fast, doesn't turn around real fast, and doesn't stop on a dime. But you saddle it with $1 trillion in new taxes, and you will, well, we like to talk about flattening the curve, right? Nowadays in, COVID 2020. Well, as far as our economy goes, $1 trillion in new taxes in 3 years will flatten the curve. And that is why, in 2000, just 8 years later, George W. Bush, little baby Bush, wins. And we're already, on the day of the election, they are already talking about the American economy going back into a recession. 1980, recap, 1980, depression. 1990, recovery. 2000, recession. These two groups of incompetent and corrupt political parties are killing the working class, and this is how it works. But now, it would be bad enough if we stopped there, but we're not. See, right before Clinton leaves office, well, Clinton passed the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, that sent hundreds of thousands of working class jobs out of the country. Horrible bill. Horrible. Just leveled hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people in the working class. Got rid of their jobs. Good paying jobs. We could stop there, but we're not. Clinton, it's not bad enough that we bail out Wall Street here in America all the time. We bailed out Mexico. So their corrupt government, and by the way, if you don't believe that, Joe Biden's actually got a whole speech on how corrupt Mexico is. But we bailed out their corruption. We could stop there, we're still not. Right before Clinton leaves office, he deregulates Wall Street. All of the rules that help protect people from the evils of the rich and greedy Wall Street, he deregulated them. He opened up the working class to horrible financial practices. Now here's the thing. It may sound like I'm railing on Bill Clinton, and I kind of am. He was an idiot. But George W. Bush takes office. Little baby Bush. Little baby Bush doesn't fix it. He doesn't put the regulations back on Wall Street. Republican, Democrat. Didn't fix it. And now we're getting into the part where most people will start probably remembering some more of this in detail. We go through 9/11. We go through, get knee-deep into a long-lasting recession. During George W. Bush's time in office, he does pass a small tax cut. Now remember, we got $1 trillion in new taxes added by strictly Democrats. Remember, the compromise between Democrats and Republicans in 1990 was the largest tax increase in U.S. history, and then 3 years later we passed one almost exactly like it, and we saddled the American people with $1 trillion in new taxes. George W. Bush passes a small tax cut. Again, the left loses their minds. It's just a tax cut for the rich. No, it was a tax cut that helped out the working class too. But the Democrats are not the party of low taxes. We see that all over the country. Every high tax state is democratically ran. If you watch the Democratic debates, all of them were talking about raising taxes a lot. But we'll get into that in another video. So George W. Bush passes a tax cut, and then 2008 is when things kind of really started going off the rails. There was, if I remember correctly, an $800 billion bailout. That's with a B. But that's in 2008. Now, the thing that bailed out the automotive industry too, and there's just a ton of our working taxpayer dollars went to pay a whole bunch of rich people because, well, they handled their jobs like a bunch of incompetents. But we bailed them out. The thing that, again, the media comes into play, just incompetent and corrupt and just horrible. That was in 2008. One of the things that didn't really make a lot of media coverage is that after this bailout was passed, the Fed and the Treasury Department decided that they weren't going to spend the money the way Congress told them to in the bill, and they just did it their own way. And Congress got really mad. Republicans and Democrats, at least some of them, said they'd been lied to. That didn't really come out in the media. And, well, what happened? 2 Republicans drafted a bill to stop the bailout money. To stop it. Now this is, what was it? September, October of 2008? I mean, just right before the election. And no, this was end of October, November of 2008. And they were going to stop the bailout money, cut it off. But then we had the election, and Obama won, and his financial guy steps in and says, no, 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 don't do that. We'll fix it. We'll get the Fed and the Treasury back under control. We'll fix it. So a huge part of the Bush bailout money was actually handled and managed by the Obama administration. It was only supposed to be $800 billion, between $700 and $800 billion. We audited the Fed during the Obama administration after the Bush bailout, and actually that number was over $1 trillion of taxpayer money that went to a whole bunch of rich people. And now we get into the Obama administration. And, well, we're going to call this the end of part one. And I'm going to save what happened then for part two. This is What Do You Believe? I'm absolutely nobody special. This is just a little YouTube channel, not monetized, and no sponsors. So the best thing you can do if this is intriguing you, piquing your curiosity, if you're learning something from it, or think that you might, hit the subscribe button. That puts me in your subscription list. Hit the bell icon. That'll actually tell you when I post a new video. And share it. If you know who I am, like I said in the first one, I'm keeping this anonymous. It doesn't, who I am and my experiences and all that, doesn't change the merits of anything I say. So, we're going to keep it anonymous. So if you know who I am, please, if you share this, don't share my name with it. Just let people watch it and judge it for what it is. Anyway, this is What Do You Believe? And we're just getting started. And believe me when I tell you, we're just getting started. Stay tuned for the Obama years and Getting Started Part 2. Hope everybody's having a good day and staying safe.